To Elder Interviews, a new program from Creation Spirituality Communities where we explore the lives and experiences of our creation spirituality elders, women and men whose spirits shine with the hard-won wisdom of the sage. My name is Dr. John Robinson, and I am delighted to be your host for this inaugural session, and it is also my pleasure to introduce Rev Dr. Gail Ransom, who will conduct our first interview. Gail is a musician, writer, a creation spirituality minister, and president of Creation Spirituality Communities. Her life's work has been nurturing spiritual growth primarily through the arts. She received her Doctor of Ministry degree in Creation Spirituality in 2010 from Wisdom University and joined the CSC board in 2013. In a moment, Gail will introduce our first distinguished guest, Rev Dr. Carol Vaccariello. But before we begin, I should explain our format. Our interview will run approximately 45 minutes, followed by a question and answer session. So I'll ring a chime at 40 minutes to let us all know that we're near the end of the interview portion. So save your questions and comments until we open the floor for everyone to participate. We are also planning to do a new interview every month at the same time. Coming next month is Rev Dr. Jeremy Taylor on May 18th, followed by Rev Dr. Mel Bricker on June 22nd. Stay tuned for future SAGE interviews. Our interviews will also be recorded and archived on the CSC website for all to enjoy later on. So, with no further ado, here is Gail Ransom to introduce our first wise elder.
Thank you, John. It's a pleasure working with you. Well, I feel very honored to introduce Carol Vaccariello. Carol has been in my life for a long time. She's taught me. She looked at my dissertation. I imagine she looked at all of our dissertations. She was our guide through that whole educational experience. And today I hope you're going to find out about how that started. So she's on a spiritual path from before her birth. So in her are brought together in a braided way, just like the name of the article in the magazine that she's featured in. She is braided into many different traditions, so it makes her very, very special. She was brought up Roman Catholic. Then she is also part of the bishop in the Independent Catholic Church. She was ordained in the Disciples of Christ, which then put her also in a yoked relationship with UCC, the United Church of Christ, and now she has a UCC church. She's a Benedictine Oblate, and she also has been ordained in the Christian spirituality tradition. So you'll hear is one of her most transforming experiences of her later life is walking for El Camino at age 70 to celebrate her age at 70. She started out and came to us by having a drum circle on the roof in El Paso in the moonlight. Matthew Fox heard about that, and the rest is history. So we welcome you, Carol, very much to our interview time here, and hope that you would start with a poem or something inspiration from your work or life.
Yes, I don't know how this is going to work with the microphone, so if I'm too loud or too soft, give me a hand signal, okay, because I'm going to sing. And what I'm going to sing is I need to tell you just a little bit of the history so that it will have the meaning that it needs to have. Before I went out on the Camino, to be honest, I'm not like so many people that went for a reason. I didn't go for a reason. I went because one of my former students asked me to go. And so I went to accompany her. But during the first couple of days, she tore all the muscles in the back of her calf. So she had to come home, and she said to me, now don't you get hurt, you stay. So that's how I ended up walking the Camino. Right before I left, I do some work here at the house with, it's called Warrior's Journey Home, and it's Afghanistan and Vietnam veterans. And we do spiritual healing here with the Sweat Lodge and the Medicine Wheel with some of these soldiers, trying to help them move from being military soldiers to being spiritual warriors. So they were here for a gathering the day before I was leaving for the Camino. And they asked me to go out. I'm always out there with them. I'm the fire keeper for the Sweat Lodge. But I didn't go out that day because I was getting ready to leave for the Camino. So as I'm getting ready, they said, come on, you've got to come out. You've got to come out. We want to send you off with a blessing. Well, I said, okay, I will. And then Christopher, my native nephew that lives with me, I go out there and every one of the men offers a blessing for me to send me on this journey. And Christopher says to me, well, Carol, aren't you going to sing us your Camino song? And I looked at him and I said, what Camino song? And then I paused, and this is what happened. As I walk on, my heart is filled with wonder. As I walk on, my heart is filled with joy. As I walk on, thrill and fear taunt me. As I walk on, as I walk on, as I walk on, into my heart is full of wonder. As I walk on, gratitude abounds. As I walk on, suffering is sacred. As I walk on, as I walk on, as I walk on into the stars of millions. As I walk on to places I don't know. As I walk on, becoming whom I know not. As I walk on, as I walk on.
Oh.
Oh.
Whoa. Thank you. Thank you.
So I want to share you the end of that is when we came in the house, Christopher said to me, I have never met an elder who wrote their own death song. That was your death song.
Huh.
And what I realized as I took it with me on the Camino is it was also my new birthing song. So one of the great learnings of the Camino was how birth and death are the same thing.
Thank you, Carol.
You're welcome.
Carol, you have lived an extraordinary life, a spiritual life, a very spiritual life. And I believe you feel part of that is because of your ancestors, the Strega and others that sent you back into this world. Can you tell us about that?
Well, my lineage is from Sicily. And my whole family is from Sicily, which is kind of interesting. Usually you have an Italian and a Sicilian, but I'm a pure Sicilian. I even have a shirt that says Sicilian Princess on it. So, but what I've learned, and I'm still learning, so I don't pretend to know all of this. I can just tell you bits and pieces. I've learned that there was a spiritual strain called the Strega, or in some circles it's called the Stregeria. And these are the wise, I mostly know about the wise women. I do know that men were part of it also. But since I'm a woman, I hook back into my grandparents, my grandmothers especially, and my great-grandmother, and how they carried this on. And I didn't even realize a lot of this until these past couple of years, since I've walked the Camino. It's been about 1.5 years ago. It's like two things happened. My mother died right before I left, and then I walked the Camino. And those two things let me know that I was beginning the end of my life, and I better make the best of these next 20-some years if I have that. So that was like a huge awakening for me. And because of that, I've started looking at things about who I am and not taking it for granted anymore and wanting to understand better. As I mentioned this to Gail once, I said, I didn't even know I was doing things that other people weren't doing. I thought that what I did, everybody did. And I thought what I knew, everybody knew. And I thought the way I was connected with spirit, everybody was. And it wasn't until I met Matt Fox and he said to me, "You do what? And you're a Christian pastor? How do you get away with that?" I said, "What am I getting away with? I didn't know I was getting away with anything. I was just doing what came naturally. Like the drum circles on the roof of the church building for the full moons. I just thought, that's a beautiful way to praise God." But then I realized this goes back further than Christianity. And so that's where this whole notion of the strega and carrying on the spiritual tradition. And then the other thing I realized as I've been thinking about all of this is my grandmothers, both of my grandmothers, neither one of them were big churchgoers, but they were deeply spiritual. My one grandmother, and this was 60 some years ago, before I think anybody else had ever heard of reflexology, she used to do reflexology. She had charts in her bedroom. And I go, "Grandma, what are those?" She goes, "Oh, I fix the feet and then the whole body's okay." And I thought, I never heard of that. And then my other grandmother used to always talk to me about the little people. And I thought that was Irish, Grandma. She goes, no, there's the little people. And so she would always talk to me about the little people. So I think that, we've had these strains that go way back into the strega. And then when I was consecrated bishop in the Independent Catholic Church, because I was awakening to all of this, on my bishop's stole in the back, instead of having a regular medicine wheel or another kind of symbol, I have a strega medicine wheel that honors that tradition. And on the front, I have the moon and the stars, and everybody thinks that's because Mary stood on the moon, and no, but that's not why it's there. It's there for the goddess. Yeah, I know that, but I never told anybody because I knew they'd freak out. So that's part of my tradition, and it's a very rooted tradition. Before I was, when I was first asked to consider consecration as bishop, I said no. I said I left the Catholic Church because I was tired of hierarchy. Why would I want to be a bishop? And they said, "Well, no, we want you to do it so you can teach us how not to be hierarchical." So I said, well, I have to pray about it. So I went to Sicily on a pilgrimage to find out if I was really called and supposed to do this. And that was the first time when I was there that the Divine Mother spoke to me. I had never, ever encountered that before. And when that happened, I knew I had to do it. So I don't want to keep rattling on. I'll give you a chance to ask your questions.
Well, I'm just wondering, I didn't ask you this yesterday, but is there any experiences in your childhood that pointed you to this powerful, spiritually powerful elder years or middle years?
Yeah, it really, I went to Catholic grade school because we were raised Roman Catholic. And one day we were out on the playground, and this is in Cleveland, Ohio, where it's freezing cold in the wintertime, and we were out in the playground, and we had a visiting priest there, probably for the Lenten season, and they would usher all of us little kids down into church, and we'd listen to him talk, and then we'd usher all back, So he was out on the playground with us one day, and it was really cold, and so all of us little kids were huddled around him, and I looked up at him. I will never forget his gray eyes. I will never forget him. I looked at his eyes and I said, "Father, someday I'm going to be a priest just like you." He said, "Oh, honey, but you can't do that." And of course, in my little mind, there was no way I couldn't do that. Why wouldn't I be able to do that? So I looked at him, I said, "No, Father, I'm going to be a priest just like you." He said, "No, honey, you can't do that, but you could be a sister." And in my little way, I think I was in the 2nd or 3rd grade, I turned around, I stomped my foot, I gritted my teeth, and I said, "No, I'm going to be a priest, just like you." And at that moment, I felt this energetic pierce go right through my heart.
Huh.
And I will never forget that.
Hmm.
So all my life, I've been trying to figure out how to be a priest just like him.
And so you have become a priest, but not quite like him. A little bit different than priest.
Well, I've actually learned
open that up.
Yeah. I've actually learned that to be a priest just like him is way too limiting.
So what do you believe is your purpose in your life? The ancestors sent you here, and of course you had the experience of being a priest. What would you say overall? Do you have a sense of your purpose?
Well, I really think that I'm a bridge person. One of the songs that I often use to introduce who I am is Bridge Over Troubled Waters. And when I've been installed at different churches and pastorates or whatever, I've often used that song. And I remember the reason I did was one of my native teachers. I've had lots of native teachers. Her name was Julie Swanson. And she happened to be a disciple of Christ pastor, but she was also a medicine woman in the Ojibwe tribe. And I remember one day she said to me, Carol, she said, what you're doing isn't going to work. And I said, what do you mean, Julie? She said, well, you have managed to get yourself on the other side of the river, and the rapids are running really fast. And you're shouting to the other side, and you're saying to everybody, come on, come on, come on over. And they're looking at those rapids, and they're going, no way are we going to cross this river. She said, so what you need to do, Carol, is you need to walk with a foot on each side of the river so that you can lift them up and help them make it past the rapids. That's my job.
Did you ever find yourself in the rapids yourself? And has that ever given you wisdom or something that you've taken into what you're doing now in your elder years?
Well, you know, this whole striving of mine to figure out how to be priest, I was, well, a couple of things. You know, I did enter the convent. I did that because I didn't know what else to do. But I knew I was in the wrong place. So it was very hard. But I left. They didn't want me to leave. They begged me not to leave. And because they kept not letting me go, I finally just walked out. And that was really hard. That was really hard because I loved those people and I learned a lot there. But I knew I wasn't in the right place. So I walked out. But then I started teaching at a high school here in the Cleveland area. It's called Lumen Cordium. And it was an all-girls high school. And I was teaching theology, and I was a guidance counselor, and I was teaching music. And one day in the music class, I don't know why I said this. I don't know what the context was exactly. But I made the comment that someday I would invite them all to my ordination. Well, one of them went home and told the parents called the nuns called the priests, and I got called in. And to show you how convinced I was of this, when I got called in, I was told, all you have to do is go back in the classroom and tell them that that's never going to happen. I said, I can't do that because that's not true. I have to live my life not by your rules, but by the rules of spirit. And I'm not going to go in there and not speak my truth. They said, well, it's either that or your job. I said, then it's my job. And I was fired.
Wow. So
I know about the rapids, and I know what it means to suffer for what you believe in. But you know what? It's tough. It's a hardship, but it's not really suffering because you know, when you know that you're doing what Spirit wants you to do, at least in my life, I do it. I always say yes. One of my regional ministers told me that once. He said, Carol, if you're not sure about something, just say yes. He said, because if you always say yes, and then if Spirit doesn't want you to do that, the door will close. So I always say yes.
So how has aging affected you? And what are you doing now that's a celebration of your these 20 years, as you say? How is that? What's
well, it's a real kick to get older. This is the most exciting time of my life. The adventure is incredible. No one's going to fire me. I got fired 3 times, by the way. That was just once. I got fired 3 times for sticking up for what I really believe Spirit wanted. So no one's going to fire me. And even if they did, I just keep doing what I'm doing because people will want to come and be part of it. And you know what? It doesn't make any difference anymore. I'm just so free. And it's just it's a very blissful kind of freedom. You know, my friends think, you know, I'm getting ready to go on my pilgrimage this year. I'm leaving on May 9th. My friends say, well, who are you going with? I go, oh, I go alone. You're going to Europe alone? Yeah. See, they feel sorry for me. I go, oh, no, this is wonderful. Why would I want to take somebody with me that I got to take care of? No, I'm going alone. When I get there, I'll meet people. You know, we talk, we do things, we hook up. It's when I walked the Camino after my friend got hurt. I was alone. I met people, you know. Why not? Because you know what? We're not alone. And that's the other thing I've learned is I'm never alone. Never. So, and that's another thing that I think is one of my purposes in life. Not just to be a bridge over troubled waters, but to help people to connect with the spirit world. It's real. You know, and when we learn in creation spirituality about ancient wisdom, a lot of those people, that ancient wisdom is grounded in spirit. And then when we look into the future, to the new cosmology, you know, I'll never forget what Brian Swim said one day. Some of you probably heard him say this. He said, he and some other scientists were working on this project where they were attempting to create a perfect vacuum, a space where there was no thing. So they would watch, you know, their experiment, they'd watch and they'd get really excited because they'd see the vacuum creating and when they thought they got there, they're just ready to go, yay, and all of a sudden, boom, they saw life. There was something there. How did that happen? So they'd set up the experiment again, and they did this again and again and again. And every time, poof, there was life. So Brian says, you know, when I was a young scientist, somebody would come up to me and say, hey, Brian, do you believe in God? And he'd say, of course not. I'm a scientist. He said, after that experience, somebody comes up to me and says, Brian, do you believe in God? He said, of course, I'm a scientist.
Thank you. In your joy and relationship with spirit in this time of your life, they have required just one thing of you. Do you remember what you told me yesterday?
And I told you, we talked for 3 hours yesterday.
I told you. Pardon, we talked a lot about it yesterday. They talked about health. They want you to stay healthy, you said.
Yep.
So that's one of your spiritual disciplines is.
It is a spiritual discipline. And yeah, for those of you who knew me at school, I'm healthier now than I've ever been in my whole life. I work out 2 to 3 hours every morning. I swim, I lift weights, I do yoga, I walk. Right now I'm starting my training to go on my pilgrimage. So I'm walking and pretty soon I'll be putting a backpack on with several pounds in it. I go shopping and buy potatoes, you know, so I have to carry something heavy. But yeah, I'm healthier now than I've ever been. And it's a requirement. I mean, it's a whole new incentive to be healthy. Spirit needs for me to be healthy because that's another thing that's really been an incredible, exciting realization for me is that the spirit world needs us. They need us. We need them, but they need us. And once we get that, everything's different. For example, I just published a book, and that book, I never wanted to write those stories down. They were very personal. They are very personal. But this archangel that I've gotten to know, Archangel Ari-El, he said to me, and the way when I say he said to me, it's just knowing that comes into my head, and then I have to figure out how to say it in words, okay? So he explained to me, he said, look, I can't write this book. You have to do it. If you don't do it, nobody will ever know how we are here to help. You have to tell them how we've been in your life. I said, but I don't want to tell people all these private things. He said, that's what we've been getting you ready for. You have to tell people so that, and that's what I understand so clearly about this. This book, even though it's stories about me, it's not about me. It's to show people that these are ways that the spirit world wants to interact with us so that we can be more than we ever imagined, and so that everybody around us can be impacted in ways that they wouldn't be if they never heard this before. So yes, this is an incredible time in my life. There was a time when I never would have, well, like I said, it took Ari-El about how many years to get me to write that book. And then finally he said, now's the time, now. And he actually dictated it to me. Because I said, I keep trying and I can't do it.
That cooperation between spirit and human reminds me of what you were talking about collaborating with God,
Yes.
and the relationship of ego and soul that we were talking about yesterday. Could you say something about that?
Mm-hmm. Yes, about collaborating with God. See, my imago Dei has changed dramatically since I was a little Catholic kid. What I've learned in being a pastor is that so many adults still have that image of God. And it really is a crippling image. And it's not a bad image. It's just an image that doesn't let us move into the fullness of what we're called to be. So what I've learned is God needs us to be God. And what that means is that I think we're God's. First of all, I'm not sure what I mean by God. I don't use that word very much, because I don't believe any longer that there's this whatever God thing. To me, it's
the theist idea.
Yeah, it's not that. It's like the universe, and it's like the mind of everything, and it's like all together we are God. It's like when the Hindus say we're a spark of the divine. And so what we need to do is figure out how to come together so all those sparks can ignite. And so if you want to use the word God to explain this, we are God becoming God. So here's a way to think about it. Just think about how children today are so different when they're born than we were when we were born. They talk about indigo kids. They talk about kids with all these gifts. They talk about kids with this, that, and the other thing. Well, how come that's happening now and it didn't happen then? Isn't it because God is becoming God and learning from our experiences? And as God learns more about what it means to be God, as we are learning, our job is to keep learning. If we come home and sit so that we'll be safe and secure and couch potatoes and don't do anything, we're not helping God out at all. So our job is to be out there and to collaborate so that God can become God.
Wow. Powerful. They're very powerful words. So, take a breath. Part of the joy of aging is being a mentor. You usually, if we're blessed, we receive some young people in our lives whom we can mentor. And who are you mentoring?
Oh my, it's it just leaves me speechless, as you see. When about 3 years ago, I called the meeting. There was a spiritual group in Strongsville called Angel House, and when Matthew Fox and myself and a whole bunch of others were in Germany on the Hildegard of Bingen pilgrimage, I got an email letting me know that the founder of that Angel House died in her sleep. She was an acquaintance of mine, not a close friend, but I'd gone for a couple of things there. And that disturbed me that happened. She hadn't been sick. She just died one night in her sleep. When I came home that summer, our little church was trying to figure out what to do. We need a new roof. We need a new driveway. We need a new this. We didn't have that kind of money. So we thought, who could we collaborate with? And I said, I wonder how Angel House is doing. So one of my elders and we called them, and they were so excited that we wanted to come and talk with them. So we were going in an effort to say, okay, could we team up with you, share space, share property, share expenses, so that we can both do our ministries kind of thing. Well, when we got there, I realized they saw us coming as their savior, because when this lady died, her family was evicting them from their property and from everything, and they didn't have anywhere to go. So it's funny how God, the universe, the deep mystery works. So I said to the person with me, I said, don't say anything. Don't even tell them why we're here. Don't say anything, because I know what's happening now. So we invited them to come and rent space at our church. So by doing that, it made it possible for us to stay there, and it gave them a place where they could operate. Well, in order to do this, we had a meeting of the minds. We had their group and our group, and we met around the labyrinth in the center of our sanctuary. And what I found out was, and I didn't know this, in the big farmhouse at Angel House, there were 9 people living there. And so when the family was closing it out, they were evicting all these people. So the young man sitting next to me told me he didn't have anywhere to live. And I said, well, Daniel, you can come and stay with me until you find a place. And there was another gentleman across the way that I hadn't met yet. And he said to me, Pastor, how many rooms do you have in your house? I said, I have a couple. And he said, well, can I come? And I said, sure, you can come and see what I have. So this man is in his early 50s. And then I had no idea who he was. He had gotten to the meeting late because he came after work. And then he comes up to me and he says, they've been telling me about you. And I said, really? What did they tell you? He said, that you have a medicine wheel in your backyard. I said, yeah, that's right. I pray at the wheel. He said, but you're a Christian pastor. I said, yeah, that's right. Christian pastors pray. And he said, but it's a medicine wheel. I said, what's wrong with that? I can pray at a medicine wheel. I said, we have a group that prays at the medicine wheel. He really had a hard time with this. Then I find out that he is their Lakota shaman. And he had a medicine wheel at Angel House, and he had a sweat lodge at Angel House. And so he's trying to figure out why I have this medicine wheel in my backyard. So he calls me. He shows up that Friday night, meets me at the front door, and he says, I don't want to come in. I said, okay, what are you doing here if you don't want to come in? I want to pray at the wheel. I said, okay. So we walked around, we sat at the wheel, and we prayed. 2 hours later, and my mom was living with me at the time. I was taking care of my mom, and so she was in here watching all this. 2 hours later, he finally came in, and we go upstairs. I showed him the 2 rooms I had available. And as we're walking down the steps, I'm walking in front of him, and he said to me, this is all I can pay you. It's all I had to pay at Angel House. And I turned around and I looked at him and I said, Chris, we do know this is not about the money, don't we? So he's been living here for 3 years. Every now and then I tease him and I ask him when he's going home. He goes, I am home. So my point is, it's interesting how the universe kind of dropped Chris here. And then he introduced, then there's all these different speakers that used to come for Angel House. So now my home, I knew when I bought the house that it was way too big for my husband and I, but I knew someday it was going to be a spiritual community. And then I knew that Chris was the one I had been waiting for.
Hmm.
So a lot of the people that would come through to speak at Angel House, they've been coming here. So they stay in the other guest room and they speak here. So he introduced me to his best buddy, Michael. And any of you that are reading The Braided Way, Michael's the editor. And there's a native practice that we were learning about from one of these speakers that was coming through. And the practice is that when a parent dies, the tribe gives you 1 year to mourn. After the 1 year, then someone in the tribe comes to you and offers you adoption so that you don't have to be alone. Mm. It just so happened that Michael came over that day on the 1 year anniversary of his mother's death. And Chris says to me, Pastor Carol, by the way, he's lived here 3 years, he still calls me Pastor Carol. He says, Pastor Carol, have you ever thought about adopting Michael? Michael's 55, he's got a PhD in English, and he's been teaching for 20-some years at the local university. I said, no, I've never really wanted kids. I'd never thought about adopting anyone, Chris. He said, Pastor Carol, I think you should think about this. So Michael shows up, and Chris says to him, sit down and have some lunch, Mike. Pastor Carol wants to talk to you. So I said to Michael, I understand today's the 1 year anniversary of your mom's death. And he said, yep. I said, Michael, you were here for the talk that Nuadin gave. On the 1 year anniversary, someone in the tribe comes and offers adoption. Would you like it, Michael, if I adopted you? And I'm telling you, that man, he sat there and the tears flowed down his face. And I had no idea what to expect. And here's what he said. Does that mean I can call you Mom? I said, sure, Michael. I think that's what that means. Do you know he writes to me all the time? Hey, Mom. So now I've got these two young men. I mean, it's just been amazing how I'm being giving these people that are in their 50s to mentor. And there's two other that happen to be a gay couple somewhere else. And I work with them. And I have people come for spiritual direction. I work with them. And some of the stuff I've been asked to do is just incredible stuff I'd never dreamt. So it's been really an interesting, the kind of mentoring I'm doing is not what I ever expected to be doing. But see, when you live with spirit, you learn not to worry about what you expect anymore.
Yeah. Thank you. So is there any one thing that we haven't asked that you would like to have us ask, or any subject you would like to address?
I don't know. There's always so much.
One question that's just jumped out at me, so I'll trust that. It says, how are you preparing for your own dying and death?
Yeah, that's a very important question.
Yeah.
Well, I guess, probably happened while I'm lifting weights. Because Matt always says, God does not have a retirement plan, only a refirement plan. Mm-hmm. And I don't think it's an accident that when we do Sweat Lodge here, I'm the fire keeper. And one day, one of the rocks burst and hit me right here, and I have a mark right in the center of my forehead. And I don't think that was an accident. Ever since then, my nickname is Flash. Huh. So I guess how I feel about death and dying, I think the way we prepare is to live our lives. And we just live until the body stops, because you know what? We're just going to keep living after the body stops. And one of the beautiful things that I've been gifted with, that again, I never thought this could ever happen, but it is I see the ancestors. I see my mother, my father, my husband, my friend, my grandmothers every morning. I see them and we communicate. And it's really fascinating because when I see them, I never see them the way they were when they died. They're full of life. They're full of joy. If you look at my book, The Wind is My Mother, that chapter, that's an amazing event that happened. My mother wasn't supposed to die. She accidentally got knocked over. When she got knocked over and fell, the way she hit her head and everything, that happened on a Thursday. She was dead on a Sunday. It blew me away. Mm-hmm. We were more than mother-daughter. We were good friends. We did everything together. I couldn't stop grieving. No matter what I did, I couldn't do anything. All I did was cry. And I have this place that I pray at the swimming pool. There's a special place where I go to pray and to talk to the ancestors and the angels and the Great Mother and everyone. And on one morning when I was there, I said, "Grandfather," that's how I talk to God in the native way. I said, "Grandfather, you've got to help me get past this. I can't do anything. I'm stuck. Help me get past this." And he said, "You know how when spirit comes to you, how I kiss you with the wind?" I said, "Yeah, I know." He said, "Well, your mother's going to come in the wind." And I had no idea what that meant. That's the other thing about spirit. A lot of times it's just a riddle and you just have to wait and see what happens. I had no idea what that meant. So I left my prayer time. I went over and exercised with my friends and I kind of forgot about that. And I came home and I started crying. And I thought, oh, gee, here we go again. And Chris says to me, "Look, Pastor Carol, go in the back, get on your prayer bench and just get yourself grounded." I said, "Okay, I am." So I went in the backyard, sat on my prayer bench. I had my prayer shawl on. It was one of those beautiful November days where the sun is bright, but the breeze is chilly. And it was just a beautiful day. Actually, it was pretty still. And I faced the east where the big grandfather tree is that I love so much and has brought so many blessings into my life. And so I sat there looking at this grandfather tree, begging for some relief from this grief. And the sun is rising in the east, rising and warming my face as I'm cuddled into my prayer shawl. And all of a sudden I hear this really strange sound. And I'm pretty good at identifying things. And I did not know what this sound was. And it's not stopping. If anything, it's getting bigger. And it's getting closer. And I don't know what it is. And it was really kind of unnerving me. What is that sound? I mean, I'm just trying to pray and get myself grounded. And there's this sound. So finally, I turn around. And behind me, in my neighbor's yard and on the other side of my yard, are these huge trees. And the wind is blowing. And the tops of those trees are bending so much, I'm afraid they're going to break. They're blowing like crazy. And I go, wait a minute. I turn around and look at grandfather tree. Not one leaf is moving. I said, wait a minute. What's going on? I turn around and I look. Those trees are bending. I turn around, not one leaf. I said, oh, she's going to come to you in the wind. And I start crying, but now it's not tears of grief. It's like, Mom, what an entrance. It was amazing. I come running in the house, Christopher, come and look at this. And the grin on his face. And of course, I hadn't told him about what had happened this morning. And so then I thought, I got to go outside and finish this. So I went out and I went back to my prayer bench and I said, Ari-El, tell me, what am I supposed to do now? And Ari-El said to me, do you want to see your mom? I said, I'd love to see my mom. She's right here. Oh my gosh, see, this is how I found out I could see them. Ari-El, let me know. And she's right here. Now this is so beautiful. That's why I wanted to tell you this. What he let me see was I saw my mom, and then I saw all of these ancestors coming in this huge parade, and they were just very peacefully and calmly coming and circling around my mom, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds, probably thousands, circling around my mom. And she was in the center, and she was vibrant, and she was radiant, and she was smiling. And what I realized in that moment is she's full of joy, and there's lots of energy loving her, and I have nothing to worry about. Why wouldn't you want to transition to that?
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, Carol.
Welcome.
Given us so much energy and vision and wisdom in such an open and generous way. Thank you so much for your thoughts. Thank you. I'm